Our scripture reading for this morning is from the book of Genesis, chapter 24. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve you for a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute.' And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with him." And then the second reading is from the Gospel of Luke, beginning at chapter 9, beginning at verse 27. Luke 6. "But to those who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give back to who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is it to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For the measure you use will be measured to you." Holy wisdom, holy word, thanks be to God. We as human beings make judgments and draw conclusions all the time. And it's often about other human beings. We are eyewitnesses to the world around us. Have you ever drawn a conclusion about someone and had to reconsider? I know I have, especially when I read this passage. Jesus calls us to love as he loves, which is agape, self-sacrificing love, unconditional. I confess I sometimes find it very hard to do that. I look at someone and make assumptions. If they align with my values, it's easy to love them. If they don't, it's much harder. It all comes down to how we identify them. Did you know that eyewitness accounts are not nearly as reliable as you think? According to the Pennsylvania Bar Association, but I'm sure the stats are very similar in Canada, the identification of a criminal suspect by an eyewitness to the crime constitutes a form of direct testimonial evidence that may be used for the establishment of facts in a criminal investigation or prosecution. Sounds like it was written by a lawyer, doesn't it? Eyewitness identification has a long history of use in this capacity by law enforcement and the courts, in the United States and elsewhere, and has played a valuable role in both convictions and acquittals. Despite this value, our society has been confronted in years with many egregious failures of eyewitness testimony in the form of misidentifications that led to convictions of innocent people. Of particular note are findings from the era of post-conviction DNA profiling. To date, nearly 350 people, many serving lengthy prison sentences, have been exonerated because their own DNA was discovered to be incompatible with the evidence long ago collected from the crime scene. In 70% of these cases, misidentification by one or more eyewitnesses contributed significantly as evidence for conviction. So, if eyewitness accounts are not that reliable, what does that tell us about the caution we should exercise and how we identify others? I want to make a confession to you this morning. Sometimes it's good for a preacher to confess to the congregation. In the last few weeks, I have been more riled up about a news story than I have in quite a while. Nothing has got under my skin more than the protesters in Ottawa, Windsor, the Peace Bridge, and other places in Canada. I watch the interviews, and words that come to mind to describe the protesters are deluded, ignorant, idiots, white privilege, anti-science, and those are some of the nicer things. Not very Christian, is it? I looked and I came to those conclusions. But those conclusions say more about me than they really do about the protesters. Perhaps I need to do a little self-identification. How do you identify yourself? How do I? There's the obvious, of course. I'm white, I'm female, I'm middle-aged plus, and I'm a Christian. In fact, that middle-aged thing is really, I'm really kind of on the other side of that. You know those boxes you have to tick off when you're signing up for something, and I'm getting farther down I think I've got one more, and then I'm at the very end. It's hard to get my head around some days. I also like to think of myself as someone who's kind and compassionate, liberal, small L, and a product of the home and community in which I was raised. I can be patient with some things and exceedingly impatient with others. And Michelle could certainly testify to that. I'm surprised I didn't hear an amen. I'm emotional and I cry easily, and you all know that. But I'm not always sensitive to others and their feelings. In light of my reaction to the Canadian protesters and those who do not want to follow COVID protocols, I've had to take a hard look at myself, and maybe my eyewitness account of myself wasn't all that accurate. You see, Jesus calls me and you to an extraordinary kind of love. To love the way that Jesus did is strangely difficult for human beings. One of my personal mantras, philosophies is, don't let other people's behavior determine your own. Be a responder, not a reactor. It's a good rule to live by, and it's often challenging. We are reactive human beings. Our emotions take over and we respond to our environment, almost like the flight or fight instinct. It's hard not to be angry when anger's coming at you. It's hard not to be hateful when hatred is coming at you. And it's hard not to be fearful when fear is coming at you. Unfortunately, for complex reasons, it does not equally hold true that it's hard not to be loving when love is coming at you. I've often wondered why we are more easily swayed by emotions like anger, fear, and hatred than we are by love, mercy, and forgiveness. Yet the truth of all this is behind the passage in Luke 6 that comes right after the Beatitudes. When something is repeated in Scripture, or Jesus pays particular attention to it, then we should pay attention to it as well. In this particular passage, Jesus is telling the disciples how to live in a way that is consistent with building the kingdom of God here on earth. Jesus is spelling out what our personal and collective ethos is. He isn't judging them, he's encouraging them. Jesus knew how hard it was for them and how hard it is for us to love the way that he loves. So he stated it very clearly. My question is, why do I and why do we continue to resist these words? How can anyone hate in Jesus' name after reading this passage that begins with the very clear command, love, agape, your enemies? Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. This does not mean that we let people trample all over us. It means that we do not respond with the same behavior. Moreover, we are asked to lead them away from hatred and cursing and abuse toward lives of love. That's what the instructions say, plainly. Do good in response to hate. Bless in response to curses. Pray in response to treatment. Do not respond in kind. Put an end to inappropriate behavior by all means. However, as followers of Christ, we are supposed to respond with love, mercy, forgiveness. Sometimes it's easy. Most of the time, it is not. And these days, few seem to remember. How do we as followers of Christ reclaim this command to love our enemies and treat others as we wish to be treated? How do we remind ourselves in those moments when we are confronted with judgmental vitriol and or fear-filled hatred that we're supposed to respond in love and with love? How do we respond ourselves? How do we make ourselves take a deep breath and say, enough? I will not participate in your fear, anger, or hatred. What is the healthier, more loving response to those who would hate us, particularly those who hate and claim to be Christian? What might the world look like if we stopped judging everyone around us? What if we gave to everyone who asked? What if we gave our shirts to those who took our coats? What if we gave without expecting anything in return? In addition to giving money or clothes or food or housing or addiction treatment or education, what if we offered a blessing and prayers for well-being? Maybe then there would be a decline in the world's hopelessness. Maybe the rates of violence and suicide would decrease. Maybe we would see the other as siblings, recognizing their humanity and divinity. At times I'm a little naive and I'm really positive and tend to look at things like Joni does with rose-colored glasses. Although, I'll tell you, that's worn down a little in the last couple years. But I honestly think that if everyone who called themselves Christian followed these instructions that Jesus laid out in this passage, there would be no room for white supremacy, for systematic racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, misogyny, ableism, and all the other phobias and isms that perpetuate the status quo. We would have no choice but to recognize Christ in all our neighbors and respond accordingly. The question is, how do we do this? Well, my answer, one person, one situation at a time. Working here at Central has changed me, for the good, I think. It has opened my eyes to needs and situations that I never experienced in the small town or suburban churches that I've served in the past. I recall a few years back, pre-COVID, visiting someone who's loosely attached to our church and getting to know her story. And initially, I confess, I was like, oh, I got to go visit this person. Okay, well, I'll do it, because that's what pastors do. And I listened to her story, and she's about my age. And she grew up in Port Colborne, and we talked about people that actually I knew that she grew up with. And she told me about the longing she had for acceptance and love, because she didn't really get it at home. So much so that she made bad decisions. She hung around with a group that delved into drugs, hard drugs. And sadly, the drug abuse affected her. It made her schizophrenic. And I remember walking back from visiting, and my heart broke for her, because I thought, there but for the grace of God. You see, I was lucky. I had a good home. My parents loved me. We had stability. I had a good circle of friends who didn't do things, well, we did some things that we shouldn't have, but for the most part, we didn't delve into things like serious drugs or drugs of any kind, really. We didn't do things that were so risky it could affect us for the rest of our lives. I was lucky, and she wasn't. And my heart goes out to her. She wasn't an enemy, but certainly God used my relationship with her to soften me and make me realize she's my sister. So what I want us to do today, the days to come, is let's all challenge ourselves to respond with love and mercy and understanding and forgiveness, no matter what comes at us. Our behavior does not need to be determined by the behavior of those around us. We can, indeed, treat others as we wish to be treated. It all starts with looking at ourselves and identifying who we truly are. You see, self-insight is a wonderful thing. And when we look inward and are honest, it opens the door for Jesus and the Spirit to transform us, and we become a little more like the one we follow. Amen.